Welcome back. Now, our next guest really needs no introduction, but sure, we'll do one anyway, seeing they went to the trouble of writing one for us.
Absolutely, why not?
As well as presenting his own BBC talk show for the past 13 years, he's somehow found the time to pen another book.
Yes, following the success of his novels Holding and A Keeper, he's returned to secrecy and tragedy for his third book, Home Stretch, which he describes as his most personal story to date. Ireland's greatest expert, Graham Norton, joins us on the line from the UK. Good morning to you, Graham.
Hi guys, how are you doing?
Graham, while the rest of us were making banana bread and cocktails and all sorts of other stuff during lockdown, you were busy penning your third novel.
Well, I was finishing it just as we were going into lockdown. So we weren't quite in lockdown, but you could see it coming. And the end of the book was supposed to be 2020.
Oh, right.
I can't kind of throw a global pandemic in as a kind of curveball plot twist at the end. So I was thinking, what will I do? And I thought, oh, I know, I'll change 2020 to 2019. And
there you go, job done.
Book saved.
This has been described, Graham, as your most personal book. Why would you say that?
I suppose this is the first book where one of the main protagonists is a gay man. He leaves Ireland. He ends up going back. So I suppose in the last two books, it was harder to find me. It was harder to see me in the books. And in this one, I suppose, if you want to, you can try and find parallels between me and that character. But it's not about my life. It's not, it's not autobiographical in any way. But I suppose it resonates with what people think they know about me.
But you do know quite a bit, obviously, being an Irish person, about that Irish community. And I always remember you saying before, and it really stuck in my head, Graham, that you know what the insides of Irish people's houses look like versus the UK, which is a little bit different. And I think, it really explains how intimately you know that small Irish community.
Well, it's home, and it's why I like the title of Home Stretch, because you get out of Ireland, you go as far away as you can change your voice, you can change your circle of friends, but you'll never really get away because it's in you. And it's only when you come back to Ireland that you realize, I haven't lived here forever, but I will know this place better than anywhere else I ever lived. No matter how long I stay out of Ireland, I'll always know Ireland better than anywhere else. And I think when you're a kid, you find that thought depressing.
Because you think you'll never get out of the place.
And then as an older man, you find it lovely. It's a really kind of comforting, warm feeling that you feel this deep connection to a place.
And in terms of the writing process, Graham, did the writing process between book one and book three, was it very different, or did you try and follow a similar path?
I mean, it was different in that I think you go into it with a bit more confidence because you can not just start a book, you can finish a book. Because that's the big challenge. Lots of people have started a novel, and they're probably very good novels, but unless you finish it, it's nothing. So I went into it with that level of confidence, and also, you kind of flex your muscles. You kind of think, oh, actually, I think I can deal with those emotions. I can describe that situation. So I think it's a more ambitious book than the other two, and hopefully it's a better book.
We had Richard Osman last week on the show, Graham. We had Richard Osman on the show, and I'm just interested to hear what you think about his comment. Now, you have the benefit of 2 bestsellers under your belt, so bearing that in mind, what Richard said was, I had such a fear of releasing a novel as a presenter or a TV personality, because you feel the world is going to go, really, another TV personality releasing a novel. Do you get a sense of that? Do you understand where he's coming from on that?
I mean, I do, and I think in terms of publishing and writers, it must be just so galling that, I'm on here talking about my books, talk to me. Yeah. I need to sell my books, he doesn't. And I understand that frustration. But equally, you are more exposed. People will hate your book in a different way if they know who you are. Yeah, if you're just a regular first-time novelist, people will either find your book and love it, or no one will read it. Whereas, if you're Richard Osman or me, people will take great delight in ripping you apart.
And in terms of the writing and in terms of being now a best-selling novelist, was that an itch that you always wanted to scratch, Graham? Was it always in the back of your mind? Or is it something that you had on a list? God, I'm going to do this. I have an idea. Going back to the first book, did you think I have to commit this to paper?
It was. I suppose when I was young, I really wanted to write. That's what it was something I did. I wrote short stories and all that. But to actually sit down and write a novel when you're in your 20s, I don't know how people have. Like, I look at these young people like Nisha Dolan or even Sally Rooney. I mean, she's a bit older now, but when she started, I think how can you be in your house for long enough to write a novel? I mean, I know everyone's in. But in the normal run of events, if you're in your 20s, you're out, you're seeing friends, you're too busy to write a book. So it's only when you're kind of, old and the thought of going out is less appealing that then it's easier to sit at a desk and write a novel.
And you have the discipline, of course, as well, and maybe the downtime. Graham, your own show, which all of our viewers will be so familiar with, returned to closer to its kind of traditional format last night. It was brilliant to see some people in the audience, actual human beings in front of you. But what I want to say to you is you were talking to Dolly Parton like we are to you, as in you were just this gigantic, genuine, adoring fan of hers, aren't you?
Oh, I love Dolly. I mean, genuinely love her. And having spent a bit of time with her, what's interesting is that although it's, makeup and wigs and mad clothes, it's her. Like, Dolly is Dolly. And what you see is what you get. And she's one of the most genuine people I think I've ever met. And she talks about that. She talks about how she decided very early on that her public persona had to be her personal persona. Otherwise, she couldn't sustain it. She couldn't keep it going for all these years. What
was it like actually having people back in the studio, though? Having an audience there? Because that makes a hell of a difference, doesn't it?
Oh, it's so lovely. But lovely. It was lovely for us, but it was kind of, you could tell it was lovely for them as well. They were kind of thrilled to be out.
Yeah, exactly.
And we had Roisin Murphy in the studio performing, and it was just like... And what's funny is we kind of think, we're never going to take anything for granted ever again. But of course we will. Once we get through this, we'll be sitting in audience and clapping, and we'll forget that there was ever a time we weren't able to. But for last night, that audience did really appreciate it. You could tell they were delighted to be back and seeing someone entertain them.
Delighted to be sitting in a room with somebody who they weren't related to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And just to hear the sound of clapping and the sound of other people laughing, and it is extraordinary how we've come to appreciate those things we took for granted.
But do you think talking about the year that we've had, and you're saying that we take it for granted, but then we'll forget about it again. But do you think it's going to change the way we live? I know it's a very big question, but do you think we'll forget about it? We take it for granted, but do you think we'll forget about it again?
It all depends. It all depends. I mean, I think it's beginning to look like we're in this for the long haul. Yeah. So I think we're going to kind of, sort of head down and just get on with this. We will be living differently. I think if it just goes away, then obviously we will forget about it. But I think it's looking likely now that it's not just going to go. There isn't going to be a kind of a silver bullet for this thing. No. It's just going to be a thing we learn to live with. And it is those things I think that'll be hardest to get around, like going to live theatre, going to gigs. Those are the things that are going to suffer more than anything else. I think we'll find ways around most other things, but just a big, thousands of people in a hall, all cheering and shouting and sweating. I wonder how long it'll be before we get back to that.
I know, it's hard to imagine, isn't it? And it is quite sad, actually. They're the best nights out. But talk to us about some of your favourite guests. And it must be lovely, I always think, for you to realise that the likes of Matt Damon comes out and says, my favourite chat show in the world is the Graham Norton Show. And it's unsurprising because it's so relaxed from an American point of view, isn't it? I mean, they can have a drink, they can curse, they can just kick back and be themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think also that they're on the show with their friends or their peers. They're on with other actors who they might be working with or have worked with. And I think that changes kind of the dynamic. They feel less pressure than just being there by themselves, kind of thinking, oh, God, what's the answer to that question? You can kind of divert the attention to somebody else, or you can steal the attention from someone else, depending on the sort of performer you are.
But what's absolutely charming is sometimes the biggest stars in the world can be quite starstruck by the person beside them.
Yeah, no, and I think, in the end, look, I don't ask any kind of probing personal questions. I'm never going to get a big scoop or a revelation or something. But I think on the show, how you get to know those big stars is seeing the way they are with other people. Are they interested in other people? Do they ask questions? Can they compliment somebody else? Or will they just sit there and look at their own face in the monitor for an hour and a half?
So who does that?
Yeah, exactly.
Who does that before we move on?
Well, if you look carefully, you can tell.
Yes,
because every time there's a cutaway, they're like that. Just like they're just waiting for their own face to show up.
Yeah.
So look out for that.
The way the show is formatted, though, it's not nothing to do with luck. You haven't been lucky. It's the way you've created the show and the atmosphere that you provide as the host. But there's never been like a Meg Ryan on Michael Parkinson moment. There's never been a guest, or has there, Graham? Have you come close to that?
Well, I mean, there are guests who are less chatty.
Yeah.
But again, we've got this great insurance policy, this kind of other people on the sofa.
Yes.
So if I'm like, the blood bank, then I'll just quietly move down the couch. I'll somebody else.
Yeah, luckily, if they don't want to chat to you, Robert De Niro's sitting next to them.
Robert De Niro, he doesn't say much.
No,
and if
he
he
doesn't.
by himself, it would be excruciating. But you watch him laughing at something that somebody else said, or he'll ask somebody a question. So you do kind of see him, get to know him, and you realise that actually he's just quiet. He's not grumpy. Yeah. He's not in a bad mood or negative. He's very benign. He seems like a very nice man.
He's just a quiet man.
Well,
listen, not only are you a very, very good and very talented, one of the best TV show presenters, you're also a brilliant guest to have on the show. And we love talking to you. Thank you for coming on. And the best of luck with book number 3, Home Stretch. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you so much, guys. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Now, Graham's book, Home Stretch, is available now in all good bookshops nationwide.
Stay with us. We have more coming up after the break, including why Mr. Bean is still the biggest star on TV after Graham.
Yeah.